What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the show. My name is Adam. I am your host. I am bringing on another very special guest, someone who I have been talking to for years. Basically, we came up at the same time. We sort of got back into cards around 2 years ago. It is Jake from Jake's B-Ball Cards. How are we doing today?
Good, man. How are you doing?
I am doing well. So it wouldn't be a Jake's B-Ball card interview without asking you some questions about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, because I don't know if there's anybody out there that has been into him as much as you have in the content game. I'm sure it's a player that a lot of people like, but for you, I think you are definitely, it's almost part of your brand at this point. So
sure.
Give me some of your overall thoughts on SGA at the current moment.
Yeah, I mean, so just going off of most recent stuff, he had probably his second best game of his career last night against the Bulls. I'd say, in terms of how meaningful the game was, probably his best one. The Thunder were down 22 points at, I think it was even, some point in the second half. And he led the team to come back, force OT with a and one shot that he got to tie it up. And then they made a stop on defense. And then in OT they won, but he had 33 points shooting. I think it was 63% from the field, 60% from three, made all of his free throws, something like that. He was playing great out there. So he had 33, 10 assists and 5 rebounds. So, it rivals the 20 point, 20 rebound, 10 assist game he had last season, just because they came out with the win. And, to me, what I'm keeping track of too is they stayed at 6-6, so they're still at 500. They're still tied with the majority of there's kind of a top tier in the West right now that's separated themselves from everybody else, but from 5 to 10 or 12, they're all pretty close. So my thoughts in that, just of how the OKC Thunder are doing in general, and what might be good for Shai is that they could potentially, if they keep up how they've been playing, they stay competitive, which, with how the NBA is right now, with all the COVID stuff going on, players being out, on a night-to-night basis, a good team might not be a good team anymore. So it gives chances to, young teams like the Thunder who can throw guys in where they're, any guy can, you have Diallo who's been going off, you have Dort who's been going off. Every now and then Baisley will have a good game. So they have guys who can come up and kind of step up at the time being, and Shai's kind of been their, consistent guy through it. But, if they're able to play in the play-in, like we had for last season, the play-in tournament for those bottom 2 spots, which I believe it's the bottom 2 that they're playing for this season. I'd have to double check it, but yeah, it might not be a throwaway season, for them as everybody thought. And, just his stuff in general, I still think, if you look at how Trey's been performing and how their team in general has been performing, and you look at how Shai's been playing and how their team's been performing, Trey started out super hot, and even going into the season, he was pretty hot. But, as of lately, he's kind of cooled off quite a bit. He had 4 points last night, and Shai's the cool thing about Shai right now for me is throughout the season, he's getting better. And I've seen that, more confidence. He's just playing more aggressive and kind of taking into that leader, getting more comfortable being the leader and being that go-to guy on the team. So that's really exciting for me. Lots of exciting stuff. I've got some, big cards on the way back to me. So pretty pumped about that too.
Yeah, I totally agree. From your perspective, maybe you're a little bit biased here, but would you say that the 2018 class, that it's shaping up, that it's probably going to be Luka, Trey, and then SGA? Or do you see maybe a Jaren Jackson or one of the other players from that 2018 class? In my opinion, I think SGA has clearly made himself that third player with, like you said, Trey isn't playing phenomenally this year. And I think, I'm not exactly sure why. It could have been the long layoff. It could have been tons of different factors. But do you think that he's pretty much solidified himself as that solid third overall player from that draft class?
I think at this point in time, yes. The only thing that I could see happening, if Jaren Jackson Jr. can get healthy and keep his fouls, under control, he's a guy who could be, the big man of the future where he's able to handle the ball, shoot threes. And, in that way, I could see him edging out, Shai for that third spot, especially if what the Grizzlies showed us last season as being able to compete. That's interesting to me. But at this point, where we're at right now and what's happening right now, to me, SGA, Bagley hasn't been playing super great. Ayton's kind of cooled off with their, super deep team. There's kind of a space between those top three guys and kind of the rest down below them.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think that third spot is SGA's to lose at this point for the most part. So transitioning a little bit here for you kind of have moved into doing cards full time. So I'm interested from your perspective, like if someone is listening to this and they want to take cards more seriously and maybe take it to the next steps, or like you have, do you have any advice for somebody who is looking to do that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing for me was being patient. Like it took me, a year and a half or so of like really working at it like a second job. I was working 40 to 50 hours a week at, in a consulting firm. I was as a business analyst. So it was a pretty demanding job that I had. And then a lot of my free time was spent in the cards. So like, if you want to make it something that, you're able to do full time, you do have to put that investment into it. You could get lucky, and it could come sooner than that. But, to get lucky, you kind of have to work at it and create those opportunities to, for that opportunity come up. Like, you just got to be working on it constantly. Like for me, I was like, Shai, obviously worked out for me. I was buying his, Prism Silvers raw for like $25 and grading them. And that like, I got them back right as they kind of shot up. So it was good for me. But, if you're starting out early, the process is going to take like a lot longer now, because for me, the way I started was, buying those less than $100 cards raw, sending them in to get graded, and then I could like move up into the next tier of cards from there when I would get them back from grading, and I could sell them and then kind of reinvest that into more cards or better cards. But since it's now like a, half year wait time, or, 9 months or whatever it might be, depending on the service level, if you're, trying to do it that way, it can definitely be pretty difficult. I was also able to set myself up where through my content between, as a provider for different groups, like in Discord and stuff, like I was able to keep up a consistent income through, getting paid for those, or, affiliate income that I was running through them. And, I had some pretty good months, like August, when everything was going really crazy. That was a really good month for me, where it really set me up to be able to, have some security going forward. So, don't make it something that you're really forcing to happen. Like if the situation is right for you, it's definitely an awesome thing to do. But everything kind of lined up for me at the time to where I was able to make that jump. And, I was committed, past then to really keep going with it. So it's a lot to say in that, but, encouragement to be consistent with it, know that it's going to be a lot of work up on the front end of it, and know that now it's probably going to take longer than what it took me to jump into it for people who are just getting into it now.
Yeah, totally. And to put it into a little bit of perspective, when did you get back into cards, or when did you get into cards? This maybe was the first time or second time, but when was that day, month, year kind of that you got back into it? Maybe not days, but month and year, I guess.
Yeah, I think it was like May or June of like 2019. So, what is that, like a year and a half ago or something like that?
Yeah, roughly. And I mean, just to put that into perspective for the audience, like May of 2019 was Luka's I think they were still playing in Luka's rookie years, and Luka Prisms. I mean, I always will go back to that first summer of 2019 and being like, that was one of the most insane summers for anybody who had been getting back into it. Luka's were like $50 for a PSA 10, like thinking about how crazy that would have been. And then, because I remember even going back to an Instagram post that I had where I was comparing like Luka's when they were $80, and I was comparing that to like Donovan Mitchell's that were like 35, and like Tatum's that were like 35. And looking back at some of those posts, it's absolutely insane. So I definitely want to put that into perspective, especially for anybody who maybe is trying to get a little bit of value out of this kind of conversation from somebody who has turned it into a full-time gig. If you're looking at it now, Luka's are in that like 1,500 to 2,000 range. So like, it's not going to be as easy to find an opportunity like it was back in May of 2019. That's not to say that it's impossible, but it's definitely, it's not like the summer of 2019. I don't think people really understand how crazy the pricing was back then. Like, it was basically the gold rush back in the 40s. And like, the blue chip opportunities, essentially, like the Amazons, I know people hate comparing cards to the stock market sometimes, but like it's basically like if Nike, Amazon, Apple were all $50 and now they're $2,000 like they are now. It's a wild, it was a wild scene back then. And so there are opportunities, but you just kind of have to, it's like you said, it takes a little bit longer to kind of find them. And then also you might have to work a little bit harder if you're kind of trying to turn it into full time. Sure. So for you, like your content, like, I'm interested in kind of another kind of maybe piece that people will take some value from. Like, how do you kind of structure what you got going on with content? Like, are you you're on TikTok, you're on Instagram, like Twitter, you're on Twitter. So, I mean, I'm kind of just interested in your strategy overall.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting for me because I can get pretty distracted from it depending on what's going on. So my strategy has kind of always been like, I'm pretty fluid with what I kind of pursue in terms of like, which stream of, what I do in general do I pursue or put the most effort in, put the most time into. So, for a while, TikTok was doing really well and I was posting pretty consistently on there. That's kind of backed off a little bit as I've kind of, had other things come up that have taken more time. But, when I am, creating even just posts of, my cards that come in, a big thing that I'm trying to do is add value in any way that I can, even if it's just, recent pickups, which most of the time that's what it is. That's what it usually is of what I'm posting. And, I'll try to, break down the reasons why, like I might be, Miles Bridges was a recent guy that I picked up. He might be doing the best, any of the potential guys you could pick up, but he's a guy that, personally I like. He's a, high flyer. And like I talk through, so other people can, break down, why I might be doing this. And I know based on feedback that people have like taken advantage of this. And like, I know I had mentioned like Bull and because he was coming back last season at like a certain point, that there was a guy who picked up, a couple $100 worth and made like $1,000 within a couple weeks, because I was like, hey, he's coming back in a week or two. And, then his stuff shot up because it was like the scrimmage or the scrimmage or whatever it was before the bubble. Mm-hmm. So, little stuff like that where I'm just trying to mention, what I'm thinking about, because what I've learned in the hobby is if you're not having conversations with other people, if you're not getting different perspectives, you can miss out on those things that either are happening that you just don't know about, or you just haven't brought up in your own head, even if you're super deep into it. So, it's definitely, that's, my strategy is to try to, that's from the beginning, it was to, create value. And then I always love connecting with people. So, my DMs are usually always open. Like it's never really too hectic where I can't get back to people. So I usually try to respond to as many people as I can. Sometimes when it's like, join my live, I'll just kind of like delete that. But otherwise I try to, talk to people and help them through what they're going through too. And, there's people I've had conversations with, that I scroll up and it's been like 6 months to a year that I've been talking with them. So, that's kind of my strategy, is just be somebody that's accessible and, trying to provide content for those who are beginning, because I needed it. That's what I remember, starting out was like, I reached out a ton of people, and it was hard. It's hard to absorb all the information they can give you in one long message, let alone, be motivated to try to talk that out. Now when like people ask me, I'm like, hey, like I have my podcast that has a ton of information in it that you can learn a lot from. Like you're going to learn more from that than me typing out a really long message, So yeah, that's kind of been my goal.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think you had two really great points there. I think the first one is something that I go through like on a almost an hourly basis. It's my idea of what I think I should be doing with content is like constantly changing. And I think it's fairly noticeable within the content because it's just basically the amount of content that ends up getting produced. Like some days it's Instagram, some days it's more recently been YouTube, some days it's TikTok, some days it's Twitter. So it's constantly changing. And I think someone from a content perspective, like, yeah, you should probably try and build up a base on one platform and really focus on figuring that platform out. But it's also important to kind of move into other platforms and try and figure out how those ones work as well. And like you said, I think it's constantly changing for me. And then the other point that I think you made that was really good was the connecting with people. I think that I've learned more from just reading comments and reading other people's comments on content and stuff like that than I have really almost doing my own research at times. So I think that, doing it sometimes may take a little bit more work to figure out exactly where you want to try and either connect with people or learn from, comments on like Slabstock's posts or like any other big, or like Conrad, who I just had on the podcast last week. It's important to learn that way, as well as doing your own research and kind of seeing if you have a concept that you think may work. So, I mean, those were two points that I 100% agree with. And I mean, anybody who DMs me, I try and get back to them. I mean, it's sometimes it gets a little bit crazy, and sometimes I'll look at my inbox and it'll be like 7 unread notifications. I'll just have like anxiety, and I will be like, okay, I'll just respond to everybody tomorrow. And then it's 8 and I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do here? So I think those were two points that I definitely agree with. So, as somebody who has taken this to a full-time kind of thing, that's for most people, that's kind of their goal. So like, what is a goal for you that you've set within cards, that you've kind of set, or that you think is important for the future?
Yeah. I mean, for me at this point, it's really, what I've been doing has worked so far, and it's worked to be, at least sustainable at this point. But I've done like a lot of reinvesting into it to where, I do have, I have like a huge sub that's out, should have sent it out, every month in batches, you know what I mean? So changing how I do things to where when I get all that back, that'll be great. I'm going to try to liquidate that all as soon as I can. I have some big cards and I'm going to try to sell in Dallas. My goals are to have it be more of a consistent income to where, at this point it's been reinvesting. Now, as it being a full-time thing, I need it to be a, thing that I can say, okay, this is what I can rely on every month based on, what I know and the deals that I can do. I'm focusing on more of like being happy with a couple $100 gain versus, in the past it's been, let me try to 5x my money, which I've been able to do. It just takes a long time when I'm doing that through grading and stuff like that. So it's really just, my goal is, a shift in mindset and a shift in how I do things to where it's more reliable and I'm able to, get more consistency out of, my income through it. I'm not, exactly sure how that's going to look. Thankfully I've a guy who's local here who's been doing more of what my next step should be. And so I have him to kind of feed off of as far as like, information he shares with me and just kind of what his ideas, he's like, you gotta like, eventually you're going to have to diversify from SGA. And like, at this point, like I know that, and that's like my plan moving forward is to, move into the Kobe. And I've picked up some Kobe. He's probably like the second guy that I've got, in terms, or he's like definitely the biggest guy I've got in terms of legends. I need to get some LeBron, MJ, stuff like that. My plan is, Dallas, take what I have, be like, hey, if I can get some LeBron or MJ or, Kobe out of this stuff, like I'd be happy to do some trades. So definitely moving into more of the, stable, less risky. And now that I've been able to grow capital through, grading and some of these bigger purchases that I've really appreciated over time, I think that's going to allow me to, even though it's going to be a smaller return, it's going to be, enough to where I'm like, that's a decent amount of money. Like the dollar amount itself is going to be good enough for me to be like, okay, I'll take that out and keep going with what I have capital wise and in cards to just keep sustaining me through and, continue to reinvest and go from there. But, if you're doing it full time and you're trying to make, that jump, you have to switch, how you approach things from, for me, I was buying, $10 to $100 raw cards and just trying to send them all to grading. And, that's great for starting out. I think that's probably one of the best ways you can, over time, if you're just doing that, if you have a budget once a month, even if it's like $100, $200, like every month that you're sending out a sub, like your money can really grow. But that's not as sustainable when you have like a six to 9 month wait for PSA. And,
Right.
I still think that's great because it it kind of holds people back from making that jump who maybe aren't ready for it. But it definitely isn't as, sustainable if that's what you're trying to do long term. So it's more of a transition to a long-term sustainable position that I can make on it. So
Gotcha. So I have two questions about grading here. So the first one is, because you kind of mentioned your strategy around grading, has that changed from maybe and I'm not sure if this is exactly what you were doing, like were you sending in like a big bulk order and now it's kind of switched to a bunch of smaller, more consistent orders, or has your strategy changed, or what is your strategy when it comes to grading overall?
yeah, so I send in a couple really big orders, and that's generally how I've done it, is like I'll let stuff stockpile and I'll be like, oh, I should send this out. And, in the past, that's what had happened. Then it'd be a big PSA bill and, I'd be stuck on not really having any money available for it until I was making sales of the stuff I had on hand. Whereas now I've sent out a couple, 45-day, 20 days, over the last, couple months, but I haven't nearly sent out as many. I haven't been buying a ton of raw stuff. So like, that's my other thing is like, I haven't been buying a ton of like base of anything. It's all been the raw stuff that I've been buying is color of players, Gary Trent Jr., Miles Bridges. Those are a couple players I've been buying raw stuff of. Still some SGA, if I like it. So if it's a card that I think is an awesome card or whatever, just stuff I like of him more so. I'm, buying the color stuff, but definitely have moved away from the base. Generally, in general too, I've moved away from base. Like when I have 100 base Prism SGA cards at, PSA, when those get back, I'll move on from them in batches. But, that's something I'm trying to get away from. Yeah, and then I've done some like 2-day. I did a 2-day BGS sub that that came back in a week. That was fantastic. It's just expensive, and the cheapest card you want to send in is something worth $800 to $1,000. So I'm kind of moving into that place where I can get cards like that and send them in like that. But that's short-term flips where I can stuff like that. So doing the BGS stuff where it's a 2-day, it'll come back in a week, but that just moves up the price of what I have to go into. So that's almost more of what I'm looking at. Cracking 9, sending them into, or PSA 9, sending them into BGS for 9.5, stuff like that. We'll see kind of how that evolves. I'm still going to send in, long-term subs, but it might not be quite the same way as it looked before, where that's my main strategy.
That makes sense. And so you also had mentioned potentially some big cards coming back from PSA, maybe some SGA, and I'm interested would you be willing to share what those cards are on the podcast, or are you kind of holding it a little bit closer to the chest?
No, for sure. I mean, I'd love to share it here. So first card that I got back. So I recently bought a raw card reviewed Gary Trent Jr. 9.5, a National Treasures RPA out of 99. It's got a great patch. I sent that in. That one got a 9.5. Was super pumped about that. I also sent in a immaculate RPA of SGA out of 99 as well. That one got a 8.5, but based on some issues, more issues that I saw over time, I was thinking maybe it would go down to an 8. So I was pretty happy with an 8.5. 9 is the highest grade that those have. They're really tough grades. So I was really happy with that. And then for those of you who've seen, my page and the stuff I have, you'd see that I have a SGA Prism Gold Auto out of 10. That was in a PSA slab, PSA 9. Decided to crack that and send it into BGS, and that one got a 9.5 with a 10 auto.
Wow.
So the subgrades too were pretty great. It was like a 9.5 centering, 9.5 surface, 10 edges, and then a 9 corners. There was one where the 9 corners were switched, had a 9.5, and then the centering had a 9, which I think mine is better. I like the centering on him. And then there was one True Gem Plus. So I think mine has a second best grade. My PSA 9 was the only PSA graded one of those. So technically I've got like the second best grade for one of those. So that I'm going to be taking to Dallas. I'm pretty excited about it. We'll see, it's definitely the top card, we'll see what, somebody wants to pay for it.
Right.
But with him doing really good right now, it's definitely great. But yeah, so I was pretty pumped about that.
Wow. Yeah. So, I mean, that's like, and you said that was a Prism, right?
Yeah.
Prism autograph. Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's a absolute like monster card right there.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, picked it up for around $3K 2-3 months ago. Even then, it felt like kind of a stretch at that, but I saw it, and just looking at the comparable, cards, like his other high-end stuff was going for, more, even if it was a PSA 10. I was just like, there's no way that this gold is this compared to all these other, the Tiger Stripes and the, other low or color Prism. So I was like, I had to do it. And it's with the crossover, with the BGS grade, it definitely paid off. So pretty
yeah, wow. And I mean, so I'll ask one more question that I have been asking all the guests on the podcast. And I mean, I think you may have just answered the question, but I think there may be a different answer to it. So like, what is your dream card, you would say, other than this SGA gold that you have? So we'll take that out of the conversation. Other than that card, what would you say is your dream card?
So one that like, had it come up, like if it was up today, I would have bought it in a heartbeat. It was a SGA black laser, so Donruss laser. It was the black 1 of 1. It came up for like $1,200 like 6 months ago or something like that. Wish I had the funds at that point. I haven't seen it up since, but that's definitely the one that's still, because laser is kind of the thing that I started out on in terms of like, low numbered SGA that I was buying, because it was cheap and it was a great looking card to me. That's still, almost over the, Prism black 1 of 1 and, maybe the optic 1 of 1. Just because it's maybe still attainable for me too.
Right.
As far as like, I think I could get that card, but yeah, we'll see. I'd love to be able to get my hands on it. Who knows where it's at right now, but yeah, that's just because it has like, from a true collector standpoint, that's the card I kind of started out with him, that, it was early on that card and early on him. So that's the one that's kind of still stuck with me till now.
Yeah. That's like the modern stuff is so there's so many different interesting cards that are coming out of like modern products nowadays. And I think, like you said, you started out with one of the things, and that's kind of what you want to end up getting, maybe hopefully at some point. And I think that's super cool. Like I don't know. I keep asking these guests, and like in my head, I still it's honestly tough for me to even really think of what my dream card would be. And I guess maybe on one podcast I'll talk about it or something, but this podcast is about you, Jake. So that's why I'm asking you these questions. Like, what is your dream card? So I want to thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate the time. Now tell the audience where they can find you all throughout the internet.
Yeah, you guys. So Instagram is jakes_bball_cards. Twitter is jakesbballcards without any underscores or whatever. TikTok. I mean, if you just search Jake's B-ball cards, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, where else? Podcast. Yeah. So Spotify or Apple podcasts. Yeah, I've recently jumped into Clubhouse. I don't know if you've gotten into that yet. It's been a pretty cool thing. It'll be interesting as it continues to grow bigger. That's definitely a platform, card wise, it's going to be really interesting to see, because it's, emerging tech, and some of those people are people who are into cards. Is that going to be a, popular genre on there? That'll be a pretty cool thing to see. So if you guys are, on there, look Jake Burchett up on there. I'm on there, just recently got on it. So, I'll every now and then join a room that we're talking about sports cards. So yeah, stuff like that. I mean, I'm always looking for kind of what's new and what's next. So trying to get my, brand out there as many places as I can.
And you said you were going to the Dallas Card Show, correct?
Yes. So I'll be at the Dallas Card Show. If any of you are going to be there, I will have a table. I'm planning on getting a banner, so it'll be obvious that it's me, because sometimes it's hard. Like, even though I show probably my face more than a lot of the other card, accounts in general, like my pictures on Instagram, if that's all you're seeing, which is like a lot of what people see sometimes, or just through my story, you might not see my, beautiful face like all the time. So
right.
If you see that banner hanging up or whatever, like definitely say hi. Let me know if you've seen my, saw this podcast, or you have seen my stuff. But I'd love to. I mean, I get so much joy out of meeting people who, I've just known through social media or like Discord and stuff. So I've got hopefully several people I'm meeting there that I haven't met in person yet. So pretty excited about that.
Yeah, that should be a lot of fun. I'm excited. I'm excited to see kind of what comes out. I'm sure, because I've seen some other people talking about. I know the Card Talk guys are going down there, I think, or at least a few of them. I'm not sure if they all are, but yeah, I'm excited to see kind of if there's content and stuff coming out of there. So Jake, like I said, I appreciate you coming on. I'll have to have you on sometime in the future. Sure. Thank you for your time.
Awesome. Thank you, man.